Hello and welcome to the first episode of Only a Bag, a Travel Podcast. I am your host, Nathaniel Mellor, and in this podcast, because it's the first podcast, I want to talk about the four main concepts that this entire podcast series will sort of tie together. And that is the one bag philosophy, long-term traveling, house sitting, and ethical traveling. And I probably will rearrange the order of that a little bit. But those are the four main concepts I'm going to be talking about. And I'm going to probably also bring in a little bit about repatriation. I'm an Italian citizen. I was born an American citizen, but I reclaimed my Italian citizenship as well. So I would talk about a little bit about repatriation throughout this series, as well as living in Italy or traveling through Italy, because I've now lived through Italy and traveled through Italy. And because I have some experience in that, I thought it'd be interesting to talk about it. But the first thing I want to talk about is the one bag philosophy, because that's something that I've been following, and my travel partner, my wife, and I have both been following for the last couple of years now. And it's the idea, basically, the concept that you can pack down your entire life into one bag. And some of the root of this is minimalism, and some of the root of this is sort of history, for lack of a better word. It's the idea that, for hundreds, if not thousands of years, you had sailors and you had sort of not even quite vagabonds, but people who just, kind of pack some shirts and a pair of pants into a bag and just cross the, desert or cross the country or cross the ocean and never look back sort of thing. It's this it's like sort of reconnecting to this history. And then there's the minimalism aspect, which is simply, do you need everything you live with? Because when I lived, in a place that it was more static and I had a job and all sorts of things, I was still only wearing the same certain clothes over and over again. I was still only using the same toiletries as far as I might have bought all these, face creams and stuff, but I never used them. Same thing with cookware. But it's like when you really look at your life, you realize, at least I realized, I can kind of take out 80% of what I have and nothing would really change in my life. And the one bag philosophy sort of tries to encapsulate that. It sort of encapsulates this idea of, do you really need everything you have? So how do you get started, right? Where do you start with this one bag philosophy? And of course you start with the bag. It's finding a bag. And I'm going to get into that in a different episode because it's intense. It's, a big process. But I really do, the one major thing I do want to say is, don't let other people sort of get you down about your bag. There's a trope, not even a trope, there's just a popularity in backpacks, right? Because that's the sort of just getting a backpack. A lot of people don't like to also use backpacks that look like hiking backpacks, the ones that you'd, kind of hike the Appalachian Trail or something like that in. They like to use ones that look like a city backpack or look like you're going to an office job. Something sleek, it's usually gray or black, it's usually waterproof or water resistant. It maybe usually doesn't have hip buckles or anything like that. But that's the sort of consensus, is like, use a cool looking backpack. But you are more than welcome to use any bag you want. The idea is just one bag. And for some people, that is a very small, 18, 15 liter backpack that holds almost nothing. And for other people, it's a suitcase, but it's one suitcase. And that's, everybody has their own different idea of what one bag is. The other important idea for this, for living in this one bag philosophy is choosing your season wisely, and that actually kind of plays in also choosing your location wisely. Again, I'll talk about all this in other episodes. But to travel with one bag, it's a lot easier to travel when you're going to, by and large, a tropical or subtropical environment. Central America, India, Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia, actually, and Central America are the most popular ones. Southeast Asia are probably the most popular because it's like kind of a home to a lot of digital nomads. It's very cheap. It's easy to live. The visas are easy to get. You can get them at the border. So as long as you hop in and out, you can stay there sort of indefinitely. And again, the weather year round is pretty much going to be flip-flops and t-shirts, flip-flop shorts and t-shirts. So a one bag doesn't have to be filled with a parka and a pair of winter boots and jeans or anything like that. It just has to be what you need in a summer. However, if you wanted to try to do this in the winter, it is also possible. I've done this in the winter, but that requires you basically wearing your winter gear, which is your one jacket, your one sweater, your one pair of pants, your one pair of boots, and in your backpack, you're only bringing changes of shirts and underwear and socks. Now, the other thing, now that we've kind of come into this digital age, it's really, it's important to take a look at what sort of technology you need while you're traveling. And I will say, and I keep saying this, I'll get into in another episode, I'll get into this more. But we've also entered the digital age of traveling, where things like making reservations on your phone is a lot more common than in person. Things like Airbnb, hostels have moved pretty much predominantly online. Yes, you could still go to a hostel and get a room, but usually it's easier to get one before you arrive. Sort of like a hotel, it's going to be cheaper a week or two out than the night of. Hostels now work like that. There's that sort of idea of like, oh, you can find the €5 hostel and the €5 pension and the €5 dinner, and that's not as common anymore. Especially if you're just going in blind. And I've actually, back in 2013, I did go traveling sort of blind. I brought a phone just for emergencies, but it wasn't activated. And I was just going to travel because everyone had told me, oh, it's how you travel. You just go and you experience. And what I didn't realize is that no one else was traveling like this. Everybody knew that, yes, now we use Google Maps to find where we're going. Now we use our phones to hold all of our tickets or whatever it might be, because that's what's easier. The reason I bring this idea of this digital traveling up is because a lot of people are also digital nomads now traveling, which means there's a minimum amount of equipment they must bring to continue to make money. And these are the things they cannot live without, no matter how they pack or how minimalist they want to be. They will still need their computer. They'll still need possibly an iPad or a tablet or a drawing tablet. They'll still need a backup hard drive. They'll still need a phone, all the charging cords that go with it. Some people will bring a microphone. Some people bring a camera. Some people bring, a video camera, if it's rather than a picture camera, something that's designed just to take video. Some people even bring a drone if they do drone photography, is how they get their money. If they sell drone photography, if they do wedding photography and they use a drone. So there are, unfortunately, from some people who do this one bag philosophy, follow this one bag philosophy, there are these things they cannot live without. So it means that their packing has to include that, and so they have to cut down on anything else they bring, which is why they choose usually a subtropical environment. It means that their t-shirts and shorts are going to take less room than pants and boots. And the last idea or concept around this one bag traveling has to do with buy it and toss it. It's been kind of a theme, not even a theme, it's been a tool for a while for travelers to sort of just show up somewhere. We're just going to go there. And if we need clothes, we'll buy them. If we need shoes, we'll buy them. But we have our passports, we have a toothbrush, we have a backpack with a bottle of water. We are good to go. Let's just go and see what happens. I even read an article about that years ago. It was someone had posted on a dating website, are you basically looking for someone who's willing to go to Europe with me tomorrow, sort of thing. And he found someone. They went together, and they went with the clothes they had on, and they couch sat, and the person let them borrow clothes. And it was really this kind of interesting article about how two total strangers travel together. But the core idea there behind that was, we're going to buy clothes when we get there and toss them when we don't need them. And that's been popular for a while. For a couple of reasons. One, it cuts down on what you need to carry. If you're going to go to a country that you can buy a shirt for less than $1 and just wear it while you're there and toss it when you're done, then you don't have to worry about, expenditures. You don't have to worry about buying an $80 Merino Smart Dry t-shirt that's going to last you 2 years and blah, 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 blah. You just need something to cover your body while you're there. Same thing with flip-flops. You don't need to buy a $60 or $90 pair of rugged sandals that can withstand anything. You could get the $2, $1 flip-flops from Old Navy, or the equivalency of Old Navy if you're in Thailand, assuming they don't have an Old Navy in Thailand, and just wear those until they fall apart and get a new one. But this kind of brings me into this concept, and I mentioned earlier, one of the core concepts of this podcast is ethical traveling. It's how do you travel ethically? And I mean this mostly for the environment, sort of like in green traveling, environmental traveling, not eco-traveling, by the way, not eco-tourism, which I don't love because it doesn't ever really work out. And just so we have a glossary of terms, eco-traveling is when you go somewhere to help the environment. You go somewhere to help planting trees. You go somewhere to help whatever it might be that's supposed to help the environment. But unfortunately, the impact of you traveling to that place is worse than whatever impact you had on helping that place. But ethical traveling is when you're trying to travel in a way that does the least amount of damage both to the environment but also to the people who live there. When you're buying and tossing like clothes or shoes, this is a huge impact on the environment. And of course, you're just one person, et cetera, et cetera. But we're talking about a lot of shirts these days have microplastics, a lot of shoes are made out of plastic or have plastic in it. Um, there are Southeast Asian countries that don't have phenomenal recycling or trash services, in which case a lot of these end up on the beaches or in the ocean and then end up on the beaches afterwards. I know that Bali has a huge issue with pollution. I know that a lot of these sort of Southeast Asian island countries have a lot of issues with pollution simply because there's nowhere to put the trash and also because they rely a lot on prepackaged foods. I am looking at you, Nestle. So what happens is that when you're traveling, you are adding to this issue. You're not helping this issue. But I really, breaking down ethical traveling, there are unfortunates that you cannot simply get around, and that is, the plane. Taking a plane anywhere, especially if you're American. It's, as you're going to find out, it's fairly difficult to get to Europe without a plane. Yes, you can take a tanker, you can take a cargo ship, you can take a private ship, but those are expensive. I've looked into them a number of times. I mean, we're talking a couple grand just to go from America to England, or America to Spain, or to Africa. And they're not a cheap way to travel. It's just a great way to travel if you don't like planes. So unfortunately, you are already, we're causing this massive outpouring of CO2 simply because you're on a plane. And these are one of those unfortunate realities of traveling. However, once you are actively traveling, once you are actually abroad and moving around, as much as you can, trying to use public transportation, trains and buses instead of renting a car, trying to walk instead of using public transportation, that kind of thing. And it's little ways, it's small ways. It's just trying to make a small impact on the environment. Because I do think I'm definitely one of those people who think everyone should travel, because I really do think it helps widen your mind to new experiences, and it helps you sort of break down some of your own prejudice, or break down some of your own sort of faulty ideas on how the world might work. But unfortunately, we haven't created a place in which it's environmentally responsible to travel. We've created conditions in which it's easy to travel. Planes are easy to take, trains are easy to take, buses are easy to take. Things are cheaper than they've ever been. Maybe not after coronavirus, but right before coronavirus, things were very cheap. Things like Airbnb made housing easier, despite the fact that I'll get to it in a second, but made housing impossible for people who live in a city. So the conditions for traveling are the easiest they've ever been, but that doesn't mean they're the most environmentally conscious they've ever been. The other part of ethical traveling, like I said, is also trying to be as conscious as possible about the effect you're having on the people who live in that place. And that's a huge one for me. That's a really big point. And it comes up in different ways. It comes up in ways of simply, like I just mentioned, the Airbnb idea. I come from Savannah, Georgia, where short-term rentals, Airbnbs especially, are people are buying up all these apartment buildings downtown, or these in the downtown area, and not apartment buildings necessarily, but like houses, and then that have apartments in them. They're buying up carriage houses. They're buying up anything that's newly built, and they're turning them into short-term rentals, because although it's not going to be lived in year-round, they can make more money from that than they could from somebody, a student or a working professional, something like that, living in one of these apartments. So what happens is you have a ghost town downtown that nobody actually lives in, except for on like St. Patrick's Day weekend, or during the summer, or whenever it's it's a popular tourism time. And this is something you're probably going to see around the world, is some towns or some parts of towns have become dead to actual communities. Communities no longer live there and inhabit that place. And what happens is you're living in a place that is just simply only for tourism, essentially. And on one hand, this isn't necessarily something you can avoid, because even far before there was Airbnb, there were other short-term rental websites and magazines and things like that. I mean, we've been to to summer towns in southern Italy, like basically towns that only come alive in the summer. And they're I mean, one we went to last year in the off peak. We went in this sort of early. We went during spring basically, and it had I think a population in the spring around 9 to 10,000 people. But people would say like no, in summer it's about 130 140,000 people, because that's when people come, and some of the times it's people who already own apartment buildings down there are coming to their beachside apartment building, and other times it's just people renting out their apartment buildings, or renting someone else's apartment building for a couple of nights or for a couple of weeks. And especially in August. August is like the peak travel time in Europe in general. It's when everybody has time off. So it's the most expensive time to travel in Europe. It's also the most difficult as far as everything is booked, which is great for Americans, because Americans, it's usually June and July. But this isn't just about staying. This is also about the cost of living. It's a huge problem I've heard in Southeast Asia, especially places like Indonesia, which is a sort of a hub for digital nomads, and they're coming in with they're making American money in the sense of they're making an American wage. They're probably being paid in dollars, but they're making $20, $30, $40 an hour doing their work. So when they go to a place that's only charging $2 for a bowl of noodles, or 25 cents for a beer, they think, oh, that's really, really cheap. That's nothing. I can totally afford that. And they can. But then a new restaurant opens up and starts charging a little bit more and catering towards these digital nomads by selling, avocado toast, or by selling smoothies, or by selling kombucha or something like that. And they start charging more. But that's cut out the entire population of Indonesia that was, previously able to afford it, because now it's a little bit too expensive for a daily meal. And this is happening more and more because the housing is going up and the food costs are going up. And it's basically gentrification of places that don't have long-term living people, like long-term citizens living there, or long-term residents living there. It's just people coming in, living for a month or two, or leaving, but they're being replaced by somebody else who's going to live there a month or two. Again, these aren't like something, this isn't to shame people into not doing this. It's simply something to be aware of while you are traveling, is that you might be creating a problem. You might be creating an issue, and it's trying to figure out how do you prevent yourself from creating this issue? How do you prevent yourself from being a part of this problem? And it starts very slowly. I think you can't just immediately cut out things like Airbnb, because hotels are expensive. And if you don't speak the language, trying to find somebody to let you an apartment for any length of time is very difficult. But I found that once you get into a city, and if you realize, oh, actually I might live in the city for another month or two, I really like where we are, you can ask around, like, excuse me, do you know of anybody who's willing to rent me an apartment for a month or two? And not as of course it's a short-term rental, but they might have one that's more in a community, or they might have one that is directly contributing to the good of the surrounding area. This brings me to long-term traveling. It's something that Darcy and I have done many times. My travel partner and I have done many times. But it's open-ended traveling for an unspecified length of time. And it also means going to a place for longer than a couple of days. When I first went traveling, I spent 3 months traveling, and I went to 30 different cities, and spent a couple of days in each city, basically, at hostels, or at couch surfing, or staying with friends of friends. Most of it was actually staying with friends of friends. I only stayed in a hostel once. But it was because I didn't want basically somebody to say, oh, you can stay with me for 2 nights. I'm like, great. So that means I have 2 nights in Hamburg, or I have 3 nights in Munich, or I have a night in Berlin, or whatever it was. So it means I have 1 night to spend the night there, and I get there, I spend the night, and the next day I have to leave. And this is also very stressful, because I always have to find places to stay. But it's also very expensive. I'm constantly buying train tickets. I'm constantly buying bus tickets. And it also means that I don't get to really enjoy the place I'm in. So we've found it's a lot nicer to just minimum stay for 1 month. Just, I'm going to go there, I'm going to stay for 1 month, I'm going to see how it is, with the possibility to extend it longer. Now, one easy way to do this, and this is the fourth and last concept, is house sitting. And I will get into this in a large amount of detail, into great detail later on. It's essentially, though, when somebody asks you to take care of their pets or take care of their house in exchange for you staying there. You get to stay for free, and you take care of the pets, the house, the trees, the plants, whatever it might be. Occasionally money switches hands. Not often. I don't recommend I mean, for your consideration, I definitely don't recommend you paying anything. All I know is as a pet sitter, I would always charge about $20 to $35 a night, depending on where it was and how long it was, but to take care of somebody's pet. So when somebody says, "Oh, you need to pay me to come here and take care of my pet," all I would hear is you don't respect how much money it costs to actually hire somebody to do this, or to drop your dog or your cat off at a kennel. So it means they don't respect your time. They don't respect the amount of effort you're putting in. Some people don't care. Some people say, "Oh, well, that's at least cheaper than a hotel or an Airbnb, and I'll do that," which is totally fine if that's what you want to do. I personally just don't recommend it. Um, but house sitting, like I said, it's a great way to long-term travel. Some people are only looking for a house sitter for a few nights. Some people are looking for a house sitter for a few months, sometimes even a year or two. Like they'll have a house in France, let's just say, and they get a job in Saudi Arabia, and they need somebody to come and take care of their cat because they can't bring their cat or they can't bring their dog, or maybe it's no pets. Maybe it's just I just need somebody to be at the house taking care of it, making sure that if anything breaks, you're there to fix it. And that's a great, great opportunity for you to learn about a place, to stay and be part of a community for a while, because obviously a lot of these people who need house sitters, they're living in a neighborhood. They're living in maybe it's an apartment block, maybe it's a neighborhood, maybe it's just a house in a neighborhood in America somewhere. But you're becoming part of a community for the time you're there. So you're kind of learning how to live there. You're learning how to experience that place. Those are the four main concepts of this entire blog series. It's going to, like I mentioned, it's going to be about the one bag philosophy. It's going to be about ethical traveling. It's going to be about long-term traveling and house sitting. And later I will get into how to travel in Italy, repatriation, things like that. But for now, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope to see you in the next one.